The year is 1945. World War II, the deadliest conflict in human history, has finally ended. The Allied powers, led by the United States, Great Britain and the Soviet Union, have emerged victorious against the Axis powers. But, the seeds of a new conflict are already being sown. This conflict would come to be known as the Cold War. The Cold War was not a war in the traditional sense. There were no massive armies clashing on battlefields, no declarations of war. Instead, it was a state of geopolitical tension between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. These former allies, united against a common enemy, now found themselves on opposite sides of a deep ideological divide. This tension was palpable. The world watched as these two nations engaged in a high-stakes chess match. It was a game of espionage, propaganda and technological one-upmanship. The fear of a nuclear confrontation loomed large, casting a dark shadow over the globe. At the heart of the Cold War lay a fundamental clash of ideologies. The United States, a capitalist democracy, championed individual liberty, free markets, and democratic principles. The Soviet Union, a communist state, advocated for a centrally planned economy, state control, and the abolition of private property. The United States, scarred by the experience of the Great Depression, feared the spread of communism. They saw it as a threat to their way of life and their economic interests. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, viewed the United States with suspicion, seeing them as an imperial power bent on world domination. These ideological differences played out on a global stage. The United States sought to contain the spread of communism, often through military intervention and financial aid. The Soviets, meanwhile, sought to expand their sphere of influence, supporting communist revolutions and propping up communist regimes. The Cold War was marked by numerous flashpoints, each threatening to escalate into a full-blown nuclear war. One of the earliest and most iconic confrontations was the Berlin blockade of 1948–49. The Soviets, seeking to force the Western powers out of West Berlin, blockaded all land access to the city. The United States responded with the Berlin Airlift, a massive humanitarian effort that saw supplies airlifted into West Berlin for almost a year. The Korean War from 1950 to 53 marked the first time the two superpowers engaged in a proxy war. North Korea, supported by the Soviet Union and China, invaded South Korea, backed by the United States and United Nations forces. The war ended in a stalemate, but it solidified the Cold War division of the Korean Peninsula. Perhaps the most dangerous moment of the Cold War came in October 1962, with the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Soviet Union, seeking to counter the presence of American nuclear missiles in Turkey, began installing nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. For 13 tense days, the world held its breath as President John F. Kennedy and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev negotiated a peaceful resolution. The crisis was averted, but it served as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of nuclear war. The Cold War rivalry extended beyond the Earth's atmosphere into the realm of space exploration. The space race, as it came to be known, was a competition for technological superiority. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite to orbit the Earth. This achievement sent shockwaves through the United States and sparked a national effort to catch up. The United States responded in kind, founding NASA and pouring resources into its space program. The race culminated in 1969, when American astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first humans to walk on the moon. The space race had a profound impact on both nations. It led to rapid advancements in rocketry, telecommunications and computer technology, many of which have had lasting benefits for society. But it also diverted vast resources away from other pressing needs and intensified the Cold War rivalry. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union, burdened by economic stagnation and internal dissent, began to show cracks in its facade. The Iron Curtain, a term coined by Winston Churchill to describe the ideological and physical barrier separating Soviet-controlled Eastern Europe from the West, began to crumble. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev came to power in the Soviet Union, ushering in a new era of reform. Gorbachev's policies of glasnost, or openness, and perestroika, or restructuring, aimed to address the Soviet Union's deep-seated problems. But these reforms, while well-intentioned, ultimately contributed to the Soviet Union's demise. Gorbachev's reforms had unintended consequences. Glasnost, designed to increase transparency and freedom of speech, unleashed a torrent of criticism of the Soviet system. Perestroika, intended to revitalize the Soviet economy, led to economic instability and shortages. On November 9, 1989, an event occurred that would forever change the course of history. The Berlin Wall, a potent symbol of Cold War division for nearly 3 decades, fell. East German citizens, emboldened by Gorbachev's reforms and eager for freedom, stormed the wall, tearing it down brick by brick. The fall of the Berlin Wall was a watershed moment in the Cold War. It marked the symbolic end of the Soviet Empire and the beginning of the end for the Cold War itself. With the fall of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of the Soviet Union was inevitable. One by one, the Soviet satellite states in Eastern Europe declared their independence. On December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union itself ceased to exist, dissolving into 15 independent republics. The Cold War was over. The Cold War, despite its name, was a period of intense rivalry and geopolitical tension. Yet it never escalated into a full-blown hot war between the United States and the Soviet Union. The primary reason for this restraint was the terrifying prospect of nuclear annihilation. Both superpowers amassed vast nuclear arsenals, each capable of destroying the other many times over. This concept, known as mutually assured destruction or MAD, created a chilling paradox. The very existence of these weapons of unimaginable destructive power served as a deterrent against their use. The Cuban Missile Crisis brought the world perilously close to nuclear war. It underscored the fragility of peace and the importance of communication and diplomacy in navigating the treacherous waters of the Cold War. The Cold War may be over, but its legacy continues to shape the world we live in today. It left an indelible mark on global politics, economics, and technology. The Cold War division of the world into 2 opposing blocs shaped alliances, fueled regional conflicts, and influenced domestic politics in countries around the globe. The Cold War also spurred an unprecedented arms race, leading to the development of increasingly sophisticated and deadly weapons, including nuclear weapons. The proliferation of these weapons remains a major concern today, with the potential to wreak havoc on an unimaginable scale. On a more positive note, the Cold War also fostered remarkable technological advancements, particularly in the fields of space exploration, computing, and material science. Many of these innovations have had profound and lasting benefits for humanity. The Cold War may be a relic of the past, but its echoes can still be heard in the world today. The rivalry between the United States and Russia, while not as ideologically charged as it once was, continues to influence global affairs. The rise of new global powers, such as China, has further complicated the geopolitical landscape. The lessons learned from the Cold War, particularly the importance of diplomacy, deterrence, and the avoidance of nuclear war, remain as relevant as ever. As we navigate the challenges of the 21st century, it is essential to remember the hard-won lessons of the past. The Cold War serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the importance of dialogue, understanding, and a commitment to a shared future for all humankind. Only through cooperation and a shared sense of responsibility can we hope to prevent the mistakes of the past from being repeated.